After passing 3 or 4 thatched houses, they came across a large thatched house that was different from before. Then Ryu said, "Inside this place hides the orc shaman, quietly crafting traps, lying in wait for our entry." Minjuri queried, "The orcs set traps?" Ryu replied, "Indeed. As a boss, he possesses a measure of intelligence. These seemingly innocuous huts here are just disguises, designed to lure players in. In reality, this village harbors none but the orc shaman. And in the end, this entire village is a trap, meticulously set to ensnare and dispatch players." Then Minjuri said anxiously, "So, have we fallen into the trap?" Ryu nodded affirmatively and said, "At least in the eyes of the orc shaman." Minjuri inquired, "Do you have a plan?" Ryu answered, "Yes, we can turn his trap against him." And he continued, saying, "The trap is simple. Inexperienced players entering the house will trigger trap points. At that moment, the waiting orc shaman summons orcs to overwhelm them. About 10 to 20 orcs are summoned, and when surrounded, there's no escape." In fact, Ryu, of course, felt confident he could handle any number of orcs. Then Minjuri said, worried, "But if they all come out simultaneously, it could get troublesome." Ryu said with smile, "That's true, but there's a solution." And he detailed his plan for luring out the orcs. Minjuri's eyes widened as she listened and said in amazement, "So, it really can be that simple? And do you think the orc shaman will fall for it?" Ryu replied, "Don't be afraid. The plan has already been tested." With doubt in her eyes, Minjuri seemed to have made up her mind and nodded. "I'll take care of the first part of the plan." Ryu raised an eyebrow and said, "Alone?" She replied, "Yes. It's unnecessary for both of us to risk entrapment. It would appear suspicious, wouldn't it? Besides, I've grasped the intricacies of our strategy and am confident in executing it flawlessly. I aim to prove my worth." When Minjuri offered to take on the task, Ryu-min didn't object further and said, "All right, I'll wait outside." And with a mixture of resolve and apprehension, Minjuri pushed open the creaking door of the hut, stepping into the unknown alone. She cautiously entered alone, and there was no sign of anyone inside, no indication of any presence. Each step echoed on the wooden floor as she cautiously advanced, and she entered a spacious area. In this space, 20 orcs could easily fit in. Then she said to herself, "This must be the trap point that Black Scythe mentioned," and she swallowed nervously as she recalled the plan she had heard just moments ago. As Ryu said to her, "Inside, there's an orc shaman hidden. He's only focused on the sound of the door opening and footsteps, waiting for humans to come in. So we can use that to our advantage, deceive him, and corner the orcs. The method is simple. If you go a bit further, you'll reach an area with a red carpet. That's the trap point the orc shaman prepared. The moment you step on it, he summons orcs to block your escape. About 10 to 20 orcs will be summoned, and when they surround you, there's no way out. You'll go only as far as the carpet and then immediately leave the room. Afterward, the orcs will think they missed their prey and send a few scouts to lure us back. All we need to do is capture those scouts." Then Minjuri said to herself, "That sounds simple enough. I'll give it a try." After several steps, she arrived, reached the red carpet, and made a noise to signal her presence. Then she quickly turned around without looking back and exited the room. And she let out a long sigh and said, "It's not a big deal, but it's making me nervous for no reason." As she was catching her breath, she suddenly looked up and saw Ryu-min casually looking at the door. And he said to her, "Are you okay?" She said happily, "Yes," and I followed the plan and reached the red carpet. Ryu said, "Good, that's enough." But Minjuri wondered, would the orcs really send scouts after us? Ryu replied, "We'll find out if we wait." A moment later, the door opened, and 6 orcs emerged. They received orders to lure the recently escaped humans. In that moment, Ryu stepped forward, wielding his scythe, and said calmly, "Why are you searching so intently?" And with a swift and brutal motion, an orc's limbs came crashing down, the grim sound of its fall filling the air. And before the remaining orcs could even raise their axes from their waists, their hands and feet were severed swiftly. Then Ryu stepped back as if his role were completed. Now it was Minjuri's turn, her rapier gracefully ending the orcs' lives. Minjuri sighed in relief and said, "It's done." Then Ryu said to her, "Then, let's lure them again, Minjuri inquired. Will they fall for it again? Ryu replied. They might possess some intelligence, but they forget things as quickly as goldfish. After that, Minjuri ventured into the house once more, repeating the process. And when Ryu Min cuts off the orc's limbs, Minjuri quickly eliminates the orcs. Their coordinated efforts became increasingly efficient as they continued their task, almost like a well-practiced team. By the time orc summon corpses piled up next to the huts, Minjuri's voice rang out with joy. Black Scythe! We've captured all 300! Ryu Min checked his progress window and said, Exactly 1 hour has passed. Then Minjuri said happily, in just 1 hour we had managed to capture 248 orcs, reaching the impressive total of 300, and she expressed her gratitude, saying, Thanks to you, Black Scythe, we could hunt comfortably and quickly. I'm truly grateful. Ryu Min smiled, appreciating her sincerity, and asked her, How much did your level go up? Minjuri proudly said, I've already reached level 19. Then Ryu commented, Just 10,000 more experience points, and you'll rank up. And he continued saying to himself, ranking up would grant her the ability to learn new skills and enhance existing ones, making her an even more valuable ally. So he said to her, But what if I help you reach level 20? Minjuri hesitated and said, Oh, you really don't have to. Ryu said, No, I need to. Helping you reach level 20 will benefit me. I need to get a buff from you so I can set a record when I capture the High Orc. As in the 5th round, there were 4 formidable bosses. Among them, the High Orc was a particularly powerful foe, almost on par with a mid-boss. And that's why High Orc is different from other bosses. Even the time for kill rule applies differently to him. Then he said to himself, I have to raise Minjuri's level to 20, receive the 2 buffs. Then I can attempt to break the record. Without even knowing that, Minjuri raised her hand to refuse and said, You don't have to help me anymore. Ryu asked her, So does that mean we won't hunt together anymore? She replied quickly, No way. How could I run away after receiving such great help? This time I have to help Black Scythe. Then Ryu said, trying to convince her, If you want to help, do it after you reach level 20. I'll take care of you until then. Hearing that, Minjuri remained silent, her face not reflecting annoyance or frustration, but rather deep thought. And she said to herself, I can't believe Black Scythe care so much about me. Then she said, with expression revealed her gratitude for the unexpected help, It's a bit shameless, but I'll be in your care. She finally agreed. Ryu said, Sure, let's start the work again. But their conversation was interrupted by a rumbling sound from behind. Ryu and Minjuri simultaneously turned their heads to see a group approaching. This was no ordinary gathering. It was a party consisting of 5 men. Then one of them exclaimed, Hey, take a look over there. Isn't that a Black Scythe? The men, upon spotting Ryu Min, suddenly froze in their tracks, clearly taken aback. It was as though they had stumbled upon a lion in the midst of a tranquil meadow. At that moment, Ryu Min couldn't help but wonder why he felt a pang of unease. After all, these weren't monsters. They were players, and said to himself, Surely they wouldn't attack me unless they've gone completely mad. Then one of that group said, Look, there's a woman with him. The men, their initial vigilance slowly waning, exchanged uncertain glances, and one of the men ventured hesitantly and said, hello? But Ryu Min remained silent, his expression akin to someone bothered by pesky flies, his brow furrowed. Another inquired cautiously, What's going on here? As he spoke, their collective gaze shifted in unison, drawn to a peculiar sight. And they said, How many of those beasts did they bring down? They managed to kill all these orcs? And their shock quickly turned into comprehension, as responsible for the slain orcs were none other than the Black Scythes. And they started talking to themselves. Wait a moment. There were this many orcs in such a small village? Something's not right. And who's that woman next to him? A companion, perhaps? Black Scythe has a companion? That's rather unusual, unless he's using her for some peculiar purpose. Another said to himself, Her face is half and half, and she's quite buxom. She looks rather intriguing, And I had no idea Black Scythe had such perverse tastes. They couldn't utter these thoughts aloud, but their minds were active, free to criticize even the president if they so wished. But they had chosen their adversary unwisely, especially when facing someone with runic abilities. At that moment, Ryu's eyebrows arched, and he curtly instructed, Don't bother me. Just go away. one of the men stammered. "Excuse me?" Ryu said with a cold and angry look. "I said if you don't have anything to say, leave." The suddenness of his command was startling, but what truly irked them was his informal tone. And one of them questioned, "When did you start using such informal language?" Another added, "That's right. Isn't it impolite to be informal when meeting someone for the first time?" Ryu found himself equally bewildered and said to himself, individuals not even at level 13 daring to criticize someone at level 32. Then Ryu said to them dismissively, "What if, in the midst of a hunt, annoying little pests came buzzing around you? You'd want to squash them, wouldn't you? That's exactly how I feel right now. Don't trouble me. Just leave, unless you're not too attached to your lives." His words were met with silence. Then one of them urged, attempting to diffuse the tension. "Come on, guys. Let's go," another said to Ryu. "Sorry for the interruption." After that, the men retreated swiftly, and Ryu didn't take his eyes off them until they had vanished from sight. He was, in fact, reading their thoughts, and said to himself, "They must be lurking somewhere, keeping an eye on me." And they were evidently curious about my hunting techniques, hence their strategic withdrawal and decision to observe from a concealed vantage point. And he continued saying to himself, "Go ahead, watch all you want. As long as I achieve my goal, it doesn't bother me. And now, I should eliminate the boss and collect the rewards sooner rather than later, but before that, I'll level up Minjuri to 20. Shifting his gaze away from the departing men, Ryu looked at Minjuri and said, "Let's get back to hunting." But suddenly Minjuri inquired, "Why did you deliberately speak so coldly to drive them away?" Ryu said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Why did you use such an icy tone to chase them off? You used to be so gentle." Ryu, somewhat taken aback by her ability to discern his thoughts, maintained his composure and simply replied, "If I don't do this, they'll keep bothering us. I have to make it crystal clear that I'll eliminate them if they dare meddle again." And he reassured her, "Just focus on hunting and pay no mind to them." Going to the group of men who had been shooed away by Black Scythe, one of them said aloud, "Perhaps we're out of his line of sight by now?" Another asked, "But what's our plan here?" A third chimed in, "It's curiosity, my friends. We're itching to discover just how this enigmatic fellow, Black Scythe, carries out his hunting." Another said, "Ah, yes, that thought has crossed my mind as well. I'm also intrigued by where he's sourcing all these orcs from." Yet another inquired, "So, what's the strategy? Shall we sneak closer and observe?" One replied, "Don't worry. As long as we stay a reasonable distance away, we won't be noticed. And if you're feeling scared, well, you can always hang back," he said bravely. "Fear? Not in a million years. Let's move." Having mustered their courage, the 5 men ventured closer in the direction where the Black Scythe had been spotted, and one of them whispered, "I see him, over there." Then they glimpsed a quaint thatched cottage, and just beyond it, the Black Scythe in the throes of his hunt. And one remarked, "At this range, we should remain concealed." At that moment, Ryu was outside the cottage, and when the orcs appeared, Ryu cut off the limbs, and orc corpses thudded heavily to the ground. Once he'd created a substantial pile, the Black Scythe turned away, as though his part in this macabre dance was over. Seeing that, one of the men pondered aloud, "What in the world is going on here? Why hasn't he finished them?" Just then, Minjuri, as if anticipating the moment, thrust her sword into an orc. Then one of them wondered, "What? Is he helping her level up?" Another mused, "Why on earth? What's his motive?" It was an incomprehensible sight, the number 1 ranked player squandering precious time leveling up with another woman. Then someone said, "What kind of pleasure did that woman offer to earn his help? Good Lord, just look at how easy he makes hunting seem." Their perspective on the matter was profoundly altered. Some of them, toiling to bring down a single orc, now felt a pang of frustration as they watched others amass experience points with minimal effort. One of the men said, "Isn't something rather peculiar here? Take a closer look at that woman." Another said, "What do you mean?" He responded, "Every time she entered the thatched house, the orcs would emerge and follow her outside. It wasn't just a one-time occurrence, it happened repeatedly, and the orcs trailed after her like devoted followers." And he continued saying, "She's continually luring out the orcs, don't you see? I've counted at least 30 by now." Then someone wondered, "Doesn't that strike you as odd? Could there be as many orcs inside as she's drawing out?" Another said, "If those piles of orc corpses over there are coming from inside that small cottage, that would mean there were at least 300 orcs inside." One mused, It simply doesn't make sense. And in that case, the only logical conclusion is that Thatched House is an orc respawn point. Another concurred. It certainly appears that way. Otherwise, none of this adds up. In a world structured like a game, the presence of respawn points wasn't entirely out of the ordinary. In fact, it was a rather logical assumption. Then one seethed with indignation and said, could it be that they've been camping out here using this respawn point? And perhaps they asked us to leave to seize control of this spot? It was infuriating, to say the least. They burned with the desire for revenge against these two interlopers, no matter the cost. But facing off against the Black Scythe offered little hope. For now, all they could do was bide their time and watch. Then one suggested, how about we wait until those guys depart? Once they're gone, we can swoop in and claim this place. Another conceded. That sounds like a plan. We'd love to take it back by force, but we lack the strength. Regretfully, the men settled into an impatient waiting game, not realizing that this would ultimately prove to be the gravest mistake of their lives. At that time, Minjuri couldn't contain her excitement and said, Black Scythe, I've hit level 20, and this achievement had been unlocked in a mere 15 minutes. With his usual nonchalance, Ryu acknowledged, congratulations. Then Minjuri said, I've even picked up a brand new skill. Bless's effectiveness has jumped from 50% to 60%. Ryu inquired, can you cast it on me now? She said, just give me a moment. And a radiant light emanated from Minjuri's outstretched hand, making its way towards Ryu, and the system message appeared. The Bless skill, when activated, elevates all statistics by a resounding 60%. Duration, 02:59-59. Again, a verdant radiance enveloped Ryu Min's mind as it permeated his being, and Minjuri said, this is my newly acquired buff. The Swift skill dramatically enhances both attack and movement speed by a whopping 60%. Duration there was 29:59. In fact, Swift, the skill that enhanced attack and movement speed, was nothing short of a game changer. Although its effects lasted a mere 30 minutes, they were anything but trivial, and it boosts agility by a solid 40 points. While it might not be on par with Bless, it was a valuable addition to his arsenal. What's more, it promised to significantly improve his time-killing records. Ryu said, Swift is quite a useful buff, Minjuri said happily. Right? Don't fret about its short duration. I'll refresh it every 30 minutes, Ryu said. All right, let's conclude our leveling here and set our sights on that orc shaman. Then Minjuri asked, isn't hunting orcs like this profitable? Ryu replied, we must venture after other bosses as well. We can't linger here indefinitely. Minjuri wanted to help Black Scythe, so she asked, is there anything I can do to assist? He answered in a warning tone, stay out of harm's way so you don't become a liability. Despite his brusque words, Minjuri didn't take offense. Instead, she appreciated his vigilance and said, yes, don't worry. Just before Ryu Min ventured inside to confront the orc shaman, he surreptitiously glanced toward the 2 o'clock direction and said to himself, noob's time. In that direction, the same 5 individuals he had previously told to leave were observing from afar, blissfully unaware that their presence had been detected, and Ryu had discreetly kept tabs on them using the rune of inner thoughts, allowing him to read their intentions, and he said to himself, they were bad-mouthing me and Minjuri pretty harshly. His mental fortitude was substantial enough not to be swayed by insults. Still, their attitude irritated him, and he continued saying to himself, even in the face of such an overwhelming level gap, they dare to entertain such thoughts about me. Then Ryu sighed silently, believing that they just hadn't comprehended the Black Scythe's terror yet, and he said, I need to work harder to build my reputation. I can't allow anyone to talk about me like that. To reach that goal, Ryu had prepared something improvised, a plan to expose their weaknesses. It's almost like an integrity test in a way, and with a sly smile, he swung open the cottage door and stepped inside. A short while later, the cottage door shattered, and Ryu ran out of the house. Minjuri, wisely keeping her distance to avoid becoming collateral damage, widened her eyes in astonishment and said to herself, why is Black Scythe The same man who had effortlessly dispatched hundreds of orcs? Fleeing? What could possibly terrify him? Her questions were soon answered as an orc different from the normal orc came out behind Ryu. When the orc shaman bellowed, 20 more orcs materialized out of thin air. At that moment, Minjuri felt worried about the black scythe, and she said he's encircled by 20 orcs. Should I help him? Minjuri's momentary hesitation was brief, as Black Scythe, whom she knew better than anyone else, didn't fear facing 20 orcs. Then she said, with the movement speed he possesses, he should easily be able to outrun them. But why would he let himself get cornered when escape was a breeze? Knowing all this, Minjuri suspected he had a plan. At the orc shaman's command, the orcs surrounding Black Scythe initiated a coordinated attack and moved tirelessly. Seeing that Minjuri silently admired and said, he's parrying and evading them all, remarkable skill, but her admiration was short-lived, because suddenly she spotted figures approaching from behind the orc shaman. They were the same men they had encountered earlier. She said to herself, what are they up to? Could it be that, while Black Scythe is drawing the orcs' attention, they're attempting to eliminate the orc shaman? Seeing them cautiously approach with weapons drawn confirmed her suspicions, and she said to herself, no, the shaman is Black Scythe's target. Whether he knew this or not, Black Scythe was busy dealing with the orcs, and if this continues, the orc shaman will be stolen by them. Moments before that, when the group of 5 men stood watch, waiting for Black Scythe to vacate his post, one of them said, hold on a second, why is Black Scythe heading into the house? Another said, until now it's been only the woman going in there. Is he planning to lure the orcs in himself this time? Someone else inquired, his face etched with bewilderment. But why is that woman leaving her spot? At that moment, their eyes were fixed on the scene before them, brimming with incomprehension as the door shattered and the Black Scythe came running out. Then one of the onlookers exclaimed, what's going on? Black Scythe is being chased by orcs. Does that even make sense? The infamous Black Scythe is fleeing? After all, they had witnessed him sever orc limbs numerous times. He was certainly no ordinary individual. The idea of him fearing 10 orcs was preposterous, and someone wondered aloud, wait a moment, who's that monster chasing him from behind? Doesn't he look over 2 meters tall? Someone else said, he appears larger than the other orcs. Could he be the boss? Another said, could it be that he's not regenerating orcs but summoning them? As fate would have it, that was precisely the case. The boss, summoning an additional orcs, had encircled Black Scythe. After that, 20 orcs relentlessly swung their axes, and amidst them, Black Scythe danced nimbly. Then one of the men exclaimed, this is insane! Can he dodge all of that? He's a monster. But suddenly someone declared, listen, everyone, this isn't the time to be standing here idle. Another asked in confusion, why's that? He answered, it's that monster there, who we suspect is the boss. He's completely defenseless, and if we can sneak past the orcs and strike him from behind, we might be able to steal from the boss. Then someone asked, what's our move then? Do we go for the steal? Another answered, well, this is our chance. Make a quick decision, urged another. Another said in fear, but what if Black Scythe catches us in the act? He answered, Black Scythe won't notice. He's too busy with the orcs right now, and if he asks us why we stole his kill later, we can simply claim it was to rescue them because it looked perilous. Everyone agreed to this proposal, and they quietly advanced toward the orc shaman from behind, but suddenly darkness enshrouded their vision, and in their confusion, they involuntarily let out startled gasps. The group hastily attempted to cover their mouths, but the orc shaman had already detected the presence of an enemy behind him and distanced himself. Then someone said, was it anger at nearly falling victim to an ambush? At that moment, the orc shaman, who had been bellowing loudly, raised his axe high, and when the darkness lifted, they beheld the scene before them. The orcs that had surrounded Black Scythe had been summoned right in front of their eyes. Then one of them said in fear, damn it, we're in trouble. Following the orc shaman's command, the orcs simultaneously swung their axes. The group of men shouted loudly, save us! Unlike Black Scythe, the men had no skill to fend off the simultaneous axe attacks of 20 orcs. And to make matters worse, they had already struggled against just 5 orcs. Though the orcs had vanished abruptly, Ryu remained unfazed. In fact, he seemed to have anticipated this turn of events. His gaze trained on the direction the orcs had moved, and it was painfully obvious who had been just killed. It was the group of 5 men who had been watching him and Minjuri intently. Then Ryu said to himself, "As I expected, it seems they attempted to steal the orc shaman from me and got caught in the end. In fact, Ryu could have killed the orcs inside the house, but for the sake of the test, he pretended to be chased by orcs. It was a kind of test of character, to see if they would seize the opportunity to steal the orc shaman when he was in danger." Then Ryu said, "The result is as I expected." Of course, it seemed likely that they would go after the shaman. Their behavior fell squarely within the expected range of character, and the price for failing the test was death. And the darkness that suddenly occurred and obscured their vision was caused by Ryu, as at the moment when they were trying to ambush the orc shaman, he cast the spell of the Night of Death. And when night fell, the aggro of the orc shaman shifted to the 5 men, and without exception, the men became minced meat. At that moment, Ryu felt no sympathy because they were individuals who had taken advantage of someone else's life to benefit themselves. Then Ryu said, "If they hadn't been so greedy, they might have survived, and I had undoubtedly given them a chance to live, but the choice of death was entirely theirs." After that, Ryu, carrying his scythe, walked casually towards the orcs, and when the orc shaman spotted him, he raised his axe, and the orcs rushed at him, wielding their axes. But when they entered Ryu Min's range, a fountain of green blood burst forth, and the orcs fell without even swinging their weapons. And the result was the same no matter how many of them approached. They were mercilessly cut down as if they were being shredded in a blender, an attack so swift that it might appear invisible to the naked eye. Then Ryu said, "But the attack speed has definitely increased, right? With Bless and Swift, plus the 50% attack speed increase at night." And when his summoned orcs were mercilessly cut down, the orc shaman opened his eyes wide in surprise and tried to summon again with his staff. At that moment, Ryu swung his scythe and cut off the orc's head, saying, "Goodbye!" Then the system message appeared, "You have defeated the orc shaman. Experience, Pleasant 37.73%. Gold, Po 4000. Level up. Obtained Bead of Eternity. Obtained Mystic Wooden Totem. Obtained Lesser Blue Magic Stone. Obtained Stone of Balance. Subquest Progress, Stone of Balance, 2-4. The unique material item, the Mystic Wooden Totem, was a particularly welcome harvest, but above all, an item had caught Ryu's attention. It was the Bead of Eternity classification. Necklace rarity, epic. Description: a necklace adorned with a murky white bead. It is said that the souls of the defeated are trapped within the bead. Effect: gain 1 stack every time a monster is killed, reducing durability by 1. Every 100 stacks can be converted into 1 stat point. Durability: 1000. Usage restriction: regular grade or higher. It was similar in effect to the absorption rune that the flame dragon had, and the only difference was that stacks were accumulated only when monsters were killed. Then Ryu said, "It's as good as it gets to permanently raise stats, but the only downside was that it was a consumable item, as it had a durability of 1000 points. In other words, with a durability of 1000, you can gain 10 stat points." Then Ryu smiled and said, "But what if I could infinitely restore durability? Then I could raise stats indefinitely, perhaps up to 100 points, and I know that method." Among the runes, there was a special rune that restored durability, and it can be obtained in the 8th round. Then Minjuri's voice echoed, laden with curiosity. "Black Scythe, where are you?" Ryu stayed silent. The power of the Reaper's rune had significantly reduced his visibility when motionless. Swiftly, he deactivated the Night of Death skill at that moment. Minjuri, noting the peculiar alternation of light and darkness, finally locked her gaze onto Ryu Min. "Oh, there you are. I've been searching for ages," Ryu said. "Oh, as you can see, I've been a bit busy," and he pointed to Orc Shaman's corpse. Yet Minjuri's reaction was oddly nonchalant, as if this outcome were no surprise. Then Minjuri asked, "Have you finally captured him? But haven't you seen anyone else? There were individuals attempting to steal the orc shaman from you," Ryu replied with a hint of uncertainty. "I didn't notice anyone." Minjuri voiced her doubts and said, "That's strange, don't you think? It felt like I heard screams." But Ryu chose silence. There was no need to reveal the grim evidence. Then he said, "Let's proceed and try to kill the next boss quickly." Then they headed to the third boss, the orc archer. Unlike the protracted struggle against the orc shaman, there was no reason to prolong this battle, so Ryu cut the orc into pieces very quickly. Then the system message appeared, "You have defeated the orc archer. Experience 37.73%. Gold ploy 4,000. Agile archer's boots have been acquired. Rusted arrowhead has been acquired. Lesser green magic stone has been acquired. The stone of balance has been acquired. Subquest progress. 3-4 stones of balance." Ryu Min, contemplating whether to inspect his newfound items, was drawn to one particular artifact, the Bead of Eternity. This epic necklace had proven itself invaluable, accumulating a stack with each slain monster, at the cost of a negligible durability reduction. Once a century stack milestone was reached, it could be converted into a precious stat point. And Ryu is also now equipped with the Agile Archer's boots, boasting a remarkable +10 agility. Ryu Min contemplated a change from his current, less impressive footwear. Then he decided to begin by disassembling the lowest-grade green magic stone, one of his oldest possessions. With the recent acquisition of a lesser green magic stone, he embarked on a fusion of the two, and the announcement declared, "Combination successful," and the resulting synergy bestowed upon the newly enhanced boots an additional perk, agility +4. As Ryu reviewed his achievements, Ryu Min acknowledged the successful conquest of all mid-level bosses. The final challenge loomed, the formidable High Orc, and this president differs from his predecessors in that he adhered to the rule of time. Faster completion equals greater rewards. Then Ryu said to himself, "This one needs to be killed rapidly. The quicker, the more bountiful the spoils," Ryu Min strategized. His previous best time, 43 seconds, was the record to beat. Though Ryu had regressed 99 times, he had yet to surpass that record. However, he held a trump card this time, Minjuri's buffs. Given his confidence in breaking records this time, Ryu resolved to delay his showdown with the High Orc, utilizing the surplus time to maximize his level. He also intended to use the Bead of Eternity without the fear of its destruction, and in his quest to attain the highest record, he committed to enhancing his stats and achieving what had thus far eluded him. After that, Ryu started killing the orcs without stopping. It was a one-sided massacre. He even killed 24-15 orcs. Then a message from the system appeared, time remaining until round end, 30 minutes and 41 seconds. And he said to himself, "It's time to change our approach. Leveling up in the remaining time doesn't seem feasible." At present, Ryu Min was standing at level 39. Just one more level, and he'd unlock new skills, significantly boosting his prowess. But time is running short for that. Still, Ryu had no regrets. He'd given it his all. 7 hours of relentless hunting, over 2,000 orcs slain. And he said to himself, "Minjuri tagged along during this ordeal, but I've handed her more than 100, so she should be content. Besides, she gave me buffs." But what made him happy most was boosting 9 stats through the Bead of Eternity. Then he said, "One more, and the bead's durability hits 0, shattering it. I'll have to halt its use to restore durability later," as the bead's remaining durability stood at 1,000. To rejuvenate it for future use, he had to cease its current use. At that moment, Minjuri asked Black Scythe, "Finished hunting?" Ryu replied, "This should suffice." Then she said, "Time to tackle the remaining boss, then? Any idea where it's located?" Ryu said. "We'll have to search for it." After that, Ryu briefly locked eyes with Minjuri and suddenly said, "Let's part ways here. You've gone through a lot chasing me," Minjuri said sadly. "Ah, is this the end?" And Minjuri's face clouded with disappointment, signaling the end of their partnership. And she said to herself, "Should I ask if it's okay to stick around until we defeat the final boss?" No, parting ways here is for the best. Being by his side would likely hinder more than help. Yes, parting ways here is the right call. Ryu heard her thoughts but chose to ignore them. The final boss, High Orc, posed a significant threat. No need for Minjuri to shadow him. Then Minjuri said, "I'll refresh your buffs one last time." As Minjuri reached out her hand, the Bless and Swift buffs reset, and she said, "Thank you again for your help with hunting. It would have been incredibly tough for me alone." And Minjuri handed over a mana crystal from her inventory, saying, "It dropped while I wheeze hunting. I'm not sure if you'll need it, but I'll give it to you." Ryu said, "You can keep it." She said, "No, I'm fine with just the experience points." Even without reading her thoughts, her sincerity shone through. Her thoughts involuntarily seeped into Ryu Min's understanding, and she was saying to herself, "Originally, I had 2, and I have to give Min 1, but I can't let Black Scythe refuse. I owe him big time." Observing Minjuri's caring nature, unaware that they were the same person, Ryu Min couldn't help but smile and said, "I also received help, so stop trying paying off your debt." Minjuri appeared bewildered by his words, as if he could see through her. In the meantime, Ryu accepted the mana crystal and said, "I'll gladly accept what you give me. Well then, we'll see each other next time." Ignoring the perplexed Minjuri, Ryo set off at a fast pace, as time was of the essence in defeating the High Orc. Among the 4 bosses in Round 5, High Orc undoubtedly stood as the mightiest. He was so formidable that even a group of 20 level 20 players wouldn't stand a chance. Maybe 100 players throwing their lives at him might have a shot. However, such a scenario had never unfolded, rendering it pointless to contemplate. Then Ryu said to himself, "That's why I can be at ease until now as the round draws to a close. There's no risk of someone snatching it from me, so there's no need to fret." And during the early regressions, no one had managed to take down the formidable High Orc. Its sheer dominance discouraged any thoughts of challenging it, except for one determined soul, Black Scythe. At first, Ryu Min had hesitated to confront the High Orc. He had ventured out to complete a sub-quest, but ended up dying 4 times, courtesy of the High Orc. However, as his head got progressively cracked open, he learned its tactics and grasped the rules of the time attack. Since then, he haven't met his demise once while hunting the High Orc, and with each passing round, he shaved off precious seconds from his hunting time, even setting a new record of 43 seconds. Then Ryu said to this time, "I'll shatter that record," and his feet pushed him forward with remarkable speed. Thanks to Swift, he could cover 100 meters in a mere 7 seconds. As he sprinted, his focus zeroed in on a specific point. The High Orc, essentially a boss that roamed the field without a fixed spot, remained elusive to Ryu Min until he employed the tracking skill. Then, the system message appears, "Target High Orc location identified. Currently, 121 meters away." Tracking isn't exclusive to players. Monsters aren't exempt. Of course, the conditions remained constant. Remember the face and name. But was tracking only useful for locating bosses? Not at all. It could be employed for regular monsters as well. If he thought of any orc and said track, it would pinpoint the nearest one. This had been the secret to his rapid hunting all along. Then Ryu said, "Seeing that tracking is possible means it hasn't been captured yet." After all, who else but Ryu Min could tackle the High Orc? The players who had fought fiercely in previous rounds were unlikely to team up now. As the distance to the High Orc shortened, and it faintly appeared within Ryu Min's field of vision, he sighed with relief and said, "Good. It hasn't been captured yet. If I handle it quickly," but an unexpected turn of events halted Ryu Min in his tracks, as the High Orc was already locked in combat with other players. These players were a group of 5 people. It was a hastily assembled party. They were essentially strangers, only teaming up for mutual gain, and each of them was having difficulty killing 300 orcs alone, as their level at that time was 12 or 13, so they decided to cooperate with each other. Recognizing their own limits, they had carefully avoided dangerous situations. After more than 6 hours of hunting, they reached the goal of taking down 300. Although they weren't sure if they had secured a top position, for now, they could breathe a sigh of relief. But suddenly one of them said, "Wouldn't it be a shame to part ways now? How about some more hunting?" Another said, "Sure, I'd like to reach level 20. The group decided to continue their hunt. Having already completed the main quest, they were feeling more relaxed and confident. They dispatched orcs with newfound assurance. After some hunting, They reached level 20, and each of them obtained a new skill, and their self-confidence increased even more. Then the party continued hunting together until their remaining time was up. During hunting, one suddenly said, "Huh? Wait a minute, what's that?" And he pointed in the direction of a peculiar orc they hadn't encountered before. It had tough, taut skin, stood over 3 meters tall, and boasted bulging muscles. Even without any weapons, it exuded power. Then one said, "What's that? It looks like an orc. I've never seen one like that before. Could it be a boss?" In the past, they would have been terrified at the mere mention of a boss. But now, they were at the peak of their confidence. Without any evidence, they simply felt it was achievable. And one of them said excitedly, "Want to try taking that guy down? The 5 of us should be able to handle it." Another said, in worried, "Should we?" The player replied, "It's a boss, so the reward should be substantial, right? If there's a reward, we'll split it fairly among us, all right?" Then they advanced towards the high orc, shouting confidently. Perhaps it was their confident shout that caught its attention. At that moment, the high orc turned its head toward the group, and when they met its eerie eyes, they instinctively felt that their opponent was not prey, but death itself. Then the high orc made a bizarre sound and leaped toward them. The colossal creature, over 3 meters tall, landed in front of the group with a resounding thud. With a single punch, one person's head burst like a balloon, and with another strike, someone's spine folded like a hinge, causing instant death. In the blink of an eye, 2 were gone, and the remaining 3 were paralyzed by fear, unable even to think about using their skills. And with another high orc's attack, 2 more players died, one after the other. They both died with their mouths open and their chests pierced. The last player from the groups felt like they were shattering, and he said in horror, "I'm going to die, I'm going to die." His mind was filled with the terror of death, and there was no time to run or counterattack. As the high orc looked at the last remaining prey, it seemed to mock him with an amused expression. To be laughed at by a monster, it was a blow to his pride. But to that player, even that was a luxury, and he said, "Please spare me, Mr. Orc, please," if he could. He wanted to grovel and beg, regardless of his pride. But he couldn't move, that was all. Then the high orc attempted to swing its fist, but before his fist could reach the player's head, suddenly the high orc's body fell to the ground, and the high orc's head bounced as it landed. At that moment, Ryu, who had approached unnoticed, let out a short breath. From behind, he had swung his scythe with all his might, cleanly severing the high orc's neck. He had wondered if it would work, but it had taken just one strike. Then, a message from the system appeared. The time it took to kill the high orc, 1 second. It was a new record. One day, a hot damn angel kidnapped 9 billion human and teleported them into a dungeon. And this our loser Ryu, who has unique gift when he dies, he goes back to the first day. He has returned 99 times, and this is his last time. Will he end this hell and take revenge? Or will his life end forever this time? Now go to the comments and you will find a playlist with all the parts. Secondly, I hope this video reaches 3,000 likes. Thank you to everyone for the continued support, especially those friends who support the channel financially. I really appreciate that. The last remaining player said in fear, "Please spare me, Mr. Orc, please," if he could. He wanted to grovel and beg, regardless of his pride, but he couldn't move. Then the high orc attempted to swing its fist, but before his fist could reach the player's head, Ryu, who had approached unnoticed, let out a short breath. From behind, he had swung his scythe with all his might, cleanly severing the high orc's neck. At that moment, the high orc's body fell to the ground, and the high orc's head bounced as it landed. Ryu had wondered if it would work, but it had taken just one strike. Then a message from the system appeared. The time it took to kill the high orc, 1 second. It was a new record, and system messages began to appear. Triumph over the high orc. Experience points gained, plus 154.79%. Gold acquired, 8,000. Additional gold, 4,000. Level up. Obtained High Orc's gauntlets. Obtained High Orc's fang. Secured low-grade purple mana crystal. Acquired Stone of Balance. Subquest progress. Stone of Balance, 4/4. But what truly piqued Ryu Min's interest was the following message. Subquest completed, rewarded with the Rune of Balance. He had acquired the Rune of Balance, a crucial item for becoming stronger, and one of the runes in his list. Rune of Balance. Effect. When the difference between pure stats is 10 or less, all stats are doubled. The condition for the Rune of Balance to work was straightforward. The difference between stats had to be 10 or less. focusing solely on attribute points and excluding items or additional effects. It means you have to evenly raise all 4 attributes. For instance, imagine if an average level 20 player were to obtain this rune with the following attributes: Strength 30, Agility 14, Intelligence 3, Luck 3. In this case, the minimum is 3 and the maximum is 30, resulting in a difference of 27. It doesn't meet the condition of 10 or less. Naturally, the rune of balance would be ineffective. On the other hand, if someone with a balanced distribution like Strength 20, Agility 10, Intelligence 10, Luck 10 were to obtain it, it would work like a charm. Minimum and maximum are both under 10, so he qualifies for the rune of balance, and all attributes would double, granting benefits that surpasses his previous stats. Then Ryu said, I already planned on getting this rune and have already balanced my attributes. Currently, Ryu Min's pure attributes were Strength 27, Agility 26, Intelligence 18, Luck 28. He had deliberately kept Intelligence lower to precisely match the minimum and maximum of 10, and his pure attributes were high compared to his level, thanks to the 9 points from the Bead of Eternity, which also included to his pure attributes. Then he said, let's see how much the attributes have increased, and he opened his status window and was pleasantly surprised. Strength, 374, Intelligence, 614, Agility, 518, Luck, 374. Seeing his status, Ryu said in surprise, all attributes are over 300, huh? Of course, it's largely due to the buff and blesses buff 1.5x, Rune of Slaughter 2x, Rune of Balance 2x. It was an unbelievable figure for someone at level 40, and there was more to be delighted about. His grade has increased from regular to expert, and he can now use the trading function, allowing him to exchange gold with other players. Of course, the other party also needs to open this function to work properly. But Ryu didn't really care about the trading function. What mattered now was that he had learned a new skill. New skill. You've unlocked the unique skill Moonlight Slaughter for Reapers. This new skill is a game changer for Reapers, serving as their sole offensive maneuver. Effect. Gather energy for 1 second, then unleash a devastating 200% area of effect damage in a crescent-shaped pattern ahead. Damage type. A hybrid mix of both physical and magical, amplified by 1.5 times when used under the cover of night. Cooldown. Requires a 10-minute cooldown and can only be employed while wielding a scythe. Then Ryu said to himself, I've finally learned it. The exclusive offensive skill for Reapers. Regrettably, Reaper-class characters are limited to just one offensive skill. The rest of their arsenal consists of buffs and debuffs, and when you only have one attack skill, it's only natural to use it cautiously. After all, if it misses, the risk is incalculable, and there's nothing more frustrating than a missed coup de grace. But all these considerations hinge on the assumption that the attack will miss. And if you're confident in landing your shots, the risk is null and void. And Moonlight Slaughter happens to be one of those skills that are relatively easy to land. With its wide crescent-shaped radius, there's practically no room for it to miss. Even if it did somehow miss, you'd have little room to complain. Plus, there's no skill more potent than this one, and with its 200% area damage, the figure jumps to a staggering 800% when deployed at night. Besides, if your opponent is immune to physical attacks, you can still hold your ground with this skill. Currently, only low-level monsters are making appearances, but sooner or later, more formidable adversaries will emerge. Those creatures are truly indomitable, the 7 archangels who reign supreme in the heavens. They are beings even Ryu cannot contend with. And Ryu said, while I've only encountered them once briefly, their power is beyond comprehension. Of course, no quests have ever instructed me to kill them, but given the opportunity, I have a burning desire to try and eliminate at least one of these archangels. Judging by the fact that regular angels drop items when defeated, Ryu has a hunch that there will be rewards. And he said, well, that's a challenge for when I've reached max level. For now, it's all about growth. Then Ryu cast a final glance at the message that had come to his mind and said, it's time to check the rewards for the time attack. You've defeated the 5th round boss High Orc in a mere 1 second. This boss is subject to the time attack rule. Additional gold will be awarded based on your record. Since you defeated it in under 10 seconds, you will receive the maximum reward of 100,000 gold. Congratulations. Seeing this gold, Ryu said. With this, I should be able to learn all the common skills I've yet to learn. Satisfied, Ryu-min was about to shift his gaze elsewhere when he paused. Upon closer inspection, he noticed there were more messages that had appeared. You've set an unprecedented record in time attack history. Your achievement will be recorded in the Akashic Records. As a reward, you will receive a unique item selection voucher. Ryu was surprised and said, "What's this all about?" This 1-second victory marked Ryu's first Akashic record. Naturally, he hadn't anticipated any extra rewards. Upon checking his inventory, he indeed found a unique item selection voucher, and he said, "You mean I can choose a unique item? Can it be anything?" Without hesitation, he pressed the button to use it. Then a message from System appeared. You're about to choose one unique item. First, please select the item category. 1. Weapons. 2. Shields. 3. Helmets. 8. Rings. Then Ryu said, they even gave him the option to pick any type of item. I need to think of something that I need right now. At that moment, Ryu-min paused briefly, his hand gently brushing his chin as he contemplated his decision. And he said, as for unique weapons, I'll craft them after returning, so they're not necessary. I needed utility more than immediate power, and he pondered which abilities might be useful in the current situation. Then he suddenly said, that could be great, and Ryu's finger landed on option 3. On the other hand, the last remaining player gazed at one spot with widened eyes, and he said to himself, did I cross the threshold of death and return? This can't be real. That monster, taken down in a single blow. The player found himself utterly bewildered, as the high orc who had crushed his comrades with one mighty punch now lay at his feet in a bizarre twist of fate. And he asked himself, was Black Scythe this strong? Then he simply gazed at the Black Scythe with a mixture of awe and admiration. At that precise moment, just as he was about to utter something, the Black Scythe swiftly vanished from sight. His expression shifted to one of regret. He hadn't even managed to utter a word of gratitude. Finally, as the time limit elapsed, the players congregated in one location, and, as if awaiting their arrival, an angelic figure materialized. Then the angel said with a blatant taunt, how did it go? Did you complete the quest? And, it seems the number of participants has dwindled within the span of 10 hours. Surely you didn't fall to those lowly orcs. Did you engage in skirmishes over prey? But the players chose to remain silent. They weren't in a position to respond, and their energy was depleted. And Priscilla continued saying, now, shall we see what results have been achieved? Then Priscilla's wings fluttered, and the results screen materialized. At that moment, the expressions of astonishment danced across the players' faces. Overall rankings, first place, Black Scythe, level 40 Reaper, 1 hour and 6 seconds. Second place, Dumb Idiots, level 25 Shaman, 2 hours, 30 minutes and 21 seconds. Third place, Heavenly Demon, level 24 Dark Knight, 2 hours, 47 minutes and 21 seconds. Zone CES007. First place, Black Scythe, level 40 Reaper, 1 hour and 6 seconds. Second place, Democracy, level 21 Buffer, 2 hours, 55 minutes and 38 seconds. Third place, Aged Man, No Gay, level 23 Warlock, 3 hours, 19 minutes and 12 seconds. The achievements of Black Scythe were indeed impressive, but it was their level that stole the spotlight. Then one player said in surprise, level 40, this is simply mind-blowing, and there were no words adequate to describe this overwhelmingly remarkable performance. Some were left speechless, while others nodded, as if expecting nothing less. After all, Black Scythe had maintained their unbeaten streak of first place since the previous rounds. But Ryu didn't share the same level of enthusiasm upon seeing the message. Then, system messages began to appear to Ryu. Congratulations! You have achieved first place in this zone. Congratulations! You have achieved first place in the overall ranking. Current ranking for Black Scythe is first place overall and first place in this zone. As the first place reward in this zone, you will receive the Intermediate Epic Necklace Selection Voucher. As the first place reward in the overall ranking, you will receive the Special Reward Selection Box. The rewards for achieving first place had started to feel somewhat repetitive, but the following message managed to pique Ryu-min's interest. Confirmed as the first player to achieve 5 consecutive first places in the overall ranking. You have accomplished an unbelievable feat. You will now be granted the title, The One Who Leads. Title, The One Who Leads. Requirement for acquisition. Achieve 5 consecutive first places in the overall ranking for the first time. Effect. increases all experience gained by 1.5 times. When Ryu read the message, a subtle smile curved at the corner of his lips and he said, "I've obtained the title as planned." And the reason for his unwavering pursuit of first place in the overall rankings lay here, with this coveted title. With this title, he could expedite his leveling progress by 1.5 times. Then Ryu continued saying to himself, "I can't afford to miss out on an opportunity to grow this fast. And this experience point boost would prove invaluable in the future. Now that I have the title I desired, should I consider selecting some first-place rewards? You can now choose one of the following epic necklaces. Please touch the reward you desire. 1. Necklace of the Skeleton Knight. 2. Necklace of the Java Tribe. 3. Necklace of Resilience. These necklaces held abilities not easily deduced from their names alone, and ordinary folks might pick one at random, like answering a test question. But Ryu was well informed about each necklace, having carefully chosen them through successive rounds, and he said, "What I need is number 2. The necklace of the Java Tribe," and without hesitation he made his choice, and the reward swiftly found its place in his inventory. Necklace of the Java Tribe. Category: Necklace. Rarity: Epic. Description: This necklace, worn by the enigmatic Java Tribe, an extraterrestrial race, is imbued with magical energy. Effects: boosts all stats by +3 and resistance by +35%. Durability: 1000. Usage restriction: requires at least regular rank. Despite possessing formidable power and skills, Ryu Min was not without vulnerabilities. Then he said, "What I need to bolster now isn't just strength or stats. It's resistance to abnormal status effects. Even the mightiest could succumb to these conditions, especially when they were widespread. And it might not be time for monsters like that yet, but it's better to be prepared." Moreover, items with resistance enhancements were exceedingly rare and valuable, making this a prudent investment. So in the future, if Ryu doesn't need them, he can sell them for a good price. And players who grasped the danger of abnormal status effects would be willing to part with a hefty sum. Lastly, Ryu turned his attention to the special reward selection box. You can now choose one of the following special rewards. Please touch the reward you desire. 1. 3x experience boost buff, limited to round 6. 2. 6,000 gold. 3. Information on round 6. Seeing that Ryu said the first option no longer featured a stat boost, but instead provided an experience boost, there's no need for deliberation. The experience boost is the best choice. Ryu was already privy to the details of round 6, and his need for additional gold was currently not pressing, and 6,000 gold didn't seem like much of a reward. That's because Ryu currently had over 220,000 gold in his possession. Then Ryu pondered and said to himself, "The 1 second time attack record was quite unexpected. I had no idea a high orc would go down in one hit. It might because was busy dealing with other players, so I could go all out." At that moment, Ryu remembered that only survivor from that group of players, and said, "Wasn't the player who drew aggro from the orc named Aom Jun Seok?" And Ryu looked around but didn't find him among the players. After that, the angel said with evil smile, "Has everyone checked their rankings through the list? If so, I have to inform you now that there are 1,585 main quest achievers. We'll mercilessly eliminate anyone below 1,211th place." The players said cringingly and fearfully, "Oh no, wait, angel, have mercy." There could be no mercy for an angel clad in the guise of a demon. Players wailed as they were wiped out. Priscilla sneered, saying pathetic, begging for their lives like this. Humans truly are no better than insects. Ryu discreetly clicked his tongue inwardly as he looked at her, and said, "You're no different to them, though." Also, he had already seen angels pleading beneath his feet. Then Priscilla said, "Inferior humans, who probably couldn't even achieve the 5th round subquest. I thought they didn't, but it seems they did," and her gaze briefly turned towards Ryu Min, her eyes reflecting a hint of unease. Then a message from System appeared. Round 5 ends. Overall rankings? Survivors, 19,327,557. Zone C, ES007. Survivors, 1,211. And the angel continued saying, "All right, humans, rest up, and we'll see you in the next round. Shortly, your souls will return to your original dimensions, and on June 1st, 2022, at midnight, round 6 will commence." As soon as Ryu Min woke up, his brow furrowed. Sunlight streamed in through the window, and checking the time, it was 10 in the morning. 10 hours had already passed. But suddenly, Ryu Min's gaze fell to the floor, where his younger sibling lay, asleep as if he'd passed out. And he said, "This kid must have been really worried," and a smile unconsciously appeared on Ryu's lips. Most likely his brother had stayed up all night, fretting because he hadn't woken up. Then Ryu called his brother, trying to wake him up. "Wanna, wake up!" Rubbing his sleepy eyes, Ryu Wan looked as if he'd been drenched with cold water when he realized Ryu Min was awake, and said, "Hyung, you're up!" "I was so worried when you didn't wake up." Ryu smiled and said, "I'm sure you checked if I was breathing." For Ryu Wan, his sibling was not only his sibling, but his only family. Even though he had heard the warning beforehand, worrying was only natural. Ryu Min knew this, so he chuckled and ruffled his brother's hair, and said, "You brat. But it's nice to see you care." His brother grumbled, saying, "Why are you like this? My head hurts." Though he grumbled deep down, he was relieved that his sibling had returned safely. Then Ryu Min said, "If you haven't eaten yet, let's have breakfast. I'm hungry." After enjoying a meal, Ryu Min returned to his room. He had work to do. Then Ryu opened the combination window, and he moved the materials he had acquired from round 5 into the slots. His goal was to create a unique item, no less. The main material was Reaper's Scythe. Sub-materials were Orc's Heart, Mysterious Wood Totem, Corroded Arrowhead, and High Orc's Molar. In the main material slot, Ryu placed the Reaper's Scythe, a weapon he intended to reinforce. Naturally, he removed the low-tier orange-grade gemstone embedded in the scythe, and he said, "If I press the combination button like this, the weapon should be enhanced into an epic item suitable for my rank." Even if it wasn't a weapon, combining it with the item he wanted to enhance and the remaining materials would result in an epic item. However, Ryu Min had something more valuable in mind: the black gold ore he had swiped from Huang Yong, as incorporating it with the black gold ore will allow Ryu to enhance it to a unique item, not an epic one. In the last slot among the sub-materials, Ryu placed the black gold ore. As he pressed the combination button, a dazzling white light burst forth, and a system message appeared. "Combination successful. Death's side has been created." Death side, type, weapon, grade, unique. Description: a formidable scythe favored by the Grim Reaper. Legend has it that the shadow of death perpetually trails this scythe. Attack power, 300. Effects, all stats plus 10 and skill damage plus 10%. Durability, 3,000. Usage requirement, expert rank or higher. Finally, Ryu had crafted the unique weapon he had longed for. Then he smiled and said, "Now, I've finally outgrown that beginner's weapon. And now, with all this extra gold, should I invest in some common skills?" The store offered 4 common skills. 1. Area scan allowed them to perceive their surroundings like a mini-map. 2. Enhanced vision elevated their sight beyond that of an average person. 3. Basic resistance boosted resistance to abnormal status effects by 15%. 4. Dexterity enhanced skill accuracy by 20%. With 220,000 gold at his disposal, Ryu could afford to learn them all. Then he said, "I would still have 140,000 gold left after purchasing all the skills." And after perusing the store, nothing else seemed worth buying at the moment. Besides the epic items coming up in a few days, there doesn't seem to be anything else worth purchasing. Although money remained unused, it wasn't entirely without purpose, thanks to the trading function. Then Ryu said, "First, let's organize those mana stones." And he combined the mana stones in his inventory into lower-grade ones and inserted them into his required equipment. After donning the entire set, Ryu opened his status window to review his stats. Name, Ryu Min. Nickname, Black Scythe. Rank, Expert. Titles, Time Regressor, hidden. First Angel Slayer, hidden. Challenger of Retribution, hidden. The One Who Leads, hidden. Level, 40. Class, Grim Reaper. Strength, 106. Intelligence, 150. Agility, 136. Luck, 106. Common skills, tracking, detection, erasure of traces, first aid, area scan, enhanced vision, basic resistance, dexterity. Exclusive skills, seal of death, night of death, moonlight slaughter, runes, rune of slaughter, rune of the Reaper, rune of illumination, rune of inner thoughts, rune of doppelganger, rune of balance. Remaining stat points, zeroed. All Ryu's stats now boasted 3 digits. This was his base stat with only the rune of balance buff, and when combined with Min Juri's buff and bless, his strength would be unmatched. Then he said, if the rune of slaughter is applied, it'll double, and I've reached my full potential for now. It's time to advance with my plans involving Ma Kyung-rock. Ryu needed to utilize Hwang Yong-min, and he asked himself, how's that guy doing? I hope he survived as planned. Considering he had always survived up to round 5, he assumed he was alive, but just to be sure, Ryu used the tracking skill to search for him. Tracking. Hwang Yong-min, face and name match, tracking the target's location. Seeing that tracking was possible, it was certain that he was alive. Then Ryu smiled and said happily, thank goodness, I can make more use of him now. Ryu had planned to use Hwang Yong to the fullest, but beyond this point, it was unrealistic, and he said, this is the last time I'm going to use him in real life. Hwang Yong would never know that his fate rests so heavily in the hands of the shuttle that had once tormented. The day after their return, Min Juri found herself seated at a cafe table, her heart racing with anticipation. She was about to meet Ryu Min, and the appointed time was drawing near. Juri pondered, her thoughts veering into the realm of speculation. Why does Min want to meet again? Could it be? And she shook her head, deeming her musings somewhat outlandish. But suddenly, her heart skipped a beat, and a delightful rush of anticipation surged through her. Whoa! Okay, calm down, stay cool. I can't afford to let it show, she reminded herself sternly. She didn't want to burden herself with unnecessary anxiety or, even worse, reveal her one-sided affection. Just then, the cafe's door swung open, and Ryu Min entered. Seeing her, Ryu Min inquired with a friendly smile, Hey, you're here already? Have you been waiting long? Min Juri replied, Oh no, not at all. I arrived just a little while ago, and she was feeling a tad self-conscious about her earlier fanciful thoughts. During that time, an awkward silence settled between them. Then Min Juri said to herself, why does it feel so awkward? Was it because of my earlier, somewhat bizarre daydreams? Even the briefest moments of silence seemed strangely uncomfortable to her. Breaking the silence, Ryu Min finally spoke. So, how was round 5? Did you meet the Black Scythe, like I said? It was a rather blunt question, but Min Juri, eager to steer the conversation, welcomed the opportunity to discuss it. Yes, just like you said, we met and hunted together. To be honest, I had doubts that the top-ranked player would join me, but when I showed him my abilities, he agreed. Ryu said, I told you so. If he sees your buffs, the Black Scythe will want you on his team, Min Juri added with enthusiasm. Thanks to that, I had a really comfortable hunting experience. I even managed to secure second place in the area for the first time, Ryu said with fake amazement. Second place? Impressive. What was the reward? She said, I received a mid-tier rare necklace that boosts agility. Would you like to see it? And she opened her inventory and displayed the necklace to Ryu Min, who responded with an impressed, wow. Of course, it was also a mere display of admiration. In a world filled with epic necklaces, regular ones hardly caught anyone's attention. Then Min Juri asked, what do you think? Does it look good? Ryu replied, it looks great. She added, you can have it. It's thanks to your prophecy that I obtained it, so it's only right for you to have it. But Ryu gently declined, pushing her hand away, and said, I'm fine. Why would you give me the reward you worked hard for? She said, it wasn't all that difficult to obtain. Thanks to the Black Scythe, I had a very comfortable hunt. Then Ryu asked her, in that case, why not give it to the Black Scythe instead? She replied, do you really think a high-level player like him needs a low-level necklace like this? Ryu agreed with her, saying, well, it's not needed, a regular grade rare necklace. For someone of his level, it was a rather useless item. With plenty of gold to his name, even selling it wouldn't make a significant difference in his finances. And he declined once more, saying, thank you, but I don't need it. I haven't even reached the regular grade yet. Min Juri gets surprised and said, what? You're not even a regular grade? What's your level? Ryu admitted with a hint of exasperation in his voice. I'm level 19. I barely managed to defeat 300 orcs on my own in 10 hours. Although unspoken, Min Juri's frustration was evident, and she said, well, a prophet isn't exactly suited for combat. Then she said to herself, having the ability to see the future, combined with strong combat skills, was just too powerful. That would just break the system. Of course, such an individual stood before her now, but it was a concept Juri couldn't even fathom. Ryu Min's demeanor, tone, and image were worlds apart from Black Scythe. But suddenly she asked a question he wasn't expecting from her. "How does the prophet fight?" Ryu replied, "Ah, I have magic skills. I'm embarrassed to show it." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Then you don't need the agility necklace? Since you're using magic, you need to increase your intelligence." Ryu said yes. But in fact, even those classes that use magic need a certain level of agility, because they have to have a means of defense, and they may not need the attack speed that increases with agility, but movement speed and evasion are somewhat helpful for survival. Of course, this had nothing to do with Ryu Min, who does not use magic. And so, when Ryu Min insisted that he didn't need it, Min Juri found herself with no other option but to tuck the necklace away. Then Min Juri said, "Well then, how about this instead?" And she suggested, retrieving the lowest grade red mana stone from her inventory, saying, "I found this during one of our hunts. I can't vouch for its quality, but it's a token of my appreciation, so please don't decline." Ryu Min, aware that Juri had prepared this for him in her mind, smiled with genuine warmth and said, "Thank you for thinking of me." It was an offhand remark, but it seemed to catch Juri off guard. Minjuri's face reddened and stuttered as she said, "I mean, I didn't do it with you specifically in mind. I just noticed you've been helping me with information all along, and I thought I should show my gratitude." Seeing Juri's flustered response, Ryu Min found it rather endearing, and he said, "I get it now. Thanks. I'll accept it gratefully." Then, without further protest, Ryu Min stowed the mana stone away. Although it was the lowest grade, collecting these could undoubtedly aid in his growth, and he said, "Since you've given me something, I feel like I should give you something too, you know." Minjuri was surprised and asked, "Huh? Like what?" Ryu replied, "Well, naturally, it's information about round 6. For a moment, she seemed disappointed, but it was a fleeting emotion. Then Juri brightened up with a wide smile and said, "If you tell me, I'll be more than thankful." As Ryu Min's prophecy unfolded, Juri's eyes gradually widened. It was all due to the mention of the Black Scythe and the directive to cooperate with him. And she said, "So, I should team up with the Black Scythe again this round?" Ryu said, "Yes. Considering that your buffs proved their worth in round 5, he probably won't decline." Then Minjuri added, "I just didn't expect to team up with him again." Ryu asked her, "Well, isn't that a good thing?" She replied, "Well, I guess so. Black Scythe was so good to me." Ryu asked, "He was good to you?" Juri answered, "Yeah. Surprisingly considerate, and not as intimidating as I had imagined. A bit cocky, sure, but that's par for the course when you're the top-ranked player." It was an unintentional self-evaluation, but Ryu Min couldn't help but smile at the unexpected compliment. It was quite a positive assessment. Then Juri added, "He also seems quite insightful, too. It's hard to put into words. What can I say? It feels like he really understands people's hearts." Ryu said to himself, "Well, I do have the rune of inner thoughts." For Ryu Min it was a given, but Juri, unaware of such a rune's existence, found Black Scythe incredibly impressive. And Ryu said to himself, "I possessed skills, insight, charisma, and thoughtfulness. A near-perfect existence, really, but I'm far from perfect. After all, I failed 99 times." Despite the sense of urgency he felt for the final round, where a 5-person party was required, failure was simply not an option. And he continued saying, "I can't afford to fail, especially when it's my last chance." Then he gazed at Juri with determination, knowing that he needed to bring her along, and said, "Juri must join me, and so must the American priest." And with 2 positions now secured, there were still 2 more to consider. Ryu's thoughts were interrupted by Minjuri's voice. "Min-ah? What's on your mind? Are you worried about how to pass the next round?" Ryu said, "Huh? Well, I am a bit concerned. I'm not that strong." While it might seem like an exaggeration to others, Ryu Min couldn't reveal his true identity for various reasons. Minjuri added, "If only the zones were integrated, I would have gladly helped you. But don't be disheartened. We'll probably meet soon." Ryu said, "Yeah, you're right. Until then, I'll stay strong. You do the same." Ryu couldn't help but smile at Juri's determined fist-pumping and her words, and he wondered how she'll react when she finds out that he is the Black Scythe. The day after Minjuri received information about round 6, Ryu rode in his car, heading to the company's office. Originally, Heavenly Demon suggested having lunch lunch together at the hotel, but Ryu declined and proposed a meeting at the company. It was time to discuss business matters. Then Ryu said to himself, I've already proven that I'm a prophet, so there shouldn't be any issues. Although Ryu hadn't yet revealed to Heavenly Demon what kind of business they would venture into, he was confident that Heavenly Demon would trust and follow him, as Heavenly Demon was a person willing to go to great lengths for the sake of his company's growth, and Ryu had a track record of solidifying his abilities as a prophet over time, and with the trust he had earned, it was now time to deliver results. But for him, this wasn't merely about making money or starting a business. It ran deeper than that, as using Heavenly Demon's company meant he could obtain any item he desired whenever the need arose. Money was just a tool for acquiring these items. His primary goal was his own personal growth, and expanding the company allowed him to strengthen his bond with Heavenly Demon. This, in turn, was his ticket to connecting with the enigmatic priest, leveraging his contacts. The financial gains that came with it were quite literally a cherry on top. When Ryu arrived at his destination, the bodyguard received him with great respect and said, Please wait a moment, I will show you to the office. And he led him to the building and into the elevator, where the bodyguard's courteous demeanor suggested that he was ordered to treat him well. Upon entering, Ryu was enthusiastically greeted by Heavenly Demon, who said, Oh, have you arrived, Major Shareholder? And he gestured for him to take a seat. Ryu could tell that Heavenly Demon's hearty laughter was somewhat contrived, meant to create a favorable impression. Then Heavenly Demon said, Major Shareholder? No, Prophet. Did you feel uncomfortable coming here? Ryu replied, Not at all. I came quite comfortably. Heavenly Demon asked, Have you had a meal? I would have liked to have lunch together. But Ryu replied seriously, There's something more important to do than have a meal. Heavenly Demon asked enthusiastically and eagerly, Could it be that you're here to tell us about the next round? Ryu had to stifle his internal laughter and said to himself, It seems you're eager to know about the 6th round. The reason Heavenly Demon mentioned it out loud was that he was afraid that Ryu might not share information with them this time. Then Ryu said, Of course I'll tell you about the 6th round as well. The Heavenly Demon asked, Have you seen the future? Ryu answered, Yes, I have. At that moment, the bodyguard approached and placed a cup of tea in front of him. He didn't show any signs, but he was eavesdropping. Then Ryu continued saying, I'll provide you with information about the 6th round, but in return, I'd like to convene an ad hoc shareholders meeting. Heavenly Demon was surprised and said, An ad hoc shareholders meeting? Ryu said, We should start discussing business soon. We need to change the industry and the company name. Heavenly Demon's expression turned serious as the topic shifted to business. In reality, business was just as important as information about the next round. Then he inquired, What can I do for you? Ryu replied, Support me in the ad hoc shareholders meeting regarding the business I propose. Although I effectively hold 51% of the shares, for a special resolution, I need a 67% majority vote for the motion to pass. Changing the company's name and industry was a significant undertaking. Without the consent of investors who had already put in money, he couldn't unilaterally make decisions. Of course, Ryu didn't need other shareholders to agree. As long as Heavenly Demon sided with him, that was enough. He seemed to understand this fact as he nodded, and said, Since I have 20% of the shares, with the two of us, we'll have 71%. Ultimately, we can easily pass any motion. Ryu said yes, but as I mentioned before, there shouldn't be any gossip. Convincing other shareholders will be necessary. Heavenly Demon said confidently, Don't worry about that. I'll ensure the other shareholders won't make things difficult. And he added, But seeing you mention this in advance, it seems that the shareholders might oppose changing the industry? Ryu said yes. I didn't find it as sweet as they might have hoped when I looked into the future, especially those shareholders who are in their 30s or older. Then Heavenly Demon asked, Exactly what kind of industry is it? He looked extremely curious. And Sang Cheol, the bodyguard who had been listening in, seemed equally interested. Ryu said to himself, He looks extremely curious. I did promise we would succeed just by changing the industry. Ryu Min laughed as he began to explain. As Ryu Min spoke, Heavenly Demon and the bodyguard leaned in. Their curiosity piqued, and Ryu said, I'm planning to create a unique social open e-market exclusively for players. Heavenly Demon said in amazement, A social open e-market? Are you referring to platforms like Auction, Amazon, and Kuopeng? In response to his question, Ryu nodded affirmatively and said, That's right. However, there's a significant twist. Only players can access it, and instead of regular articles, they'll be trading in-game items. Heavenly Demon asked, "You think these items would be traded for real cash?" Rao replied, "That's an option determined by the sellers when they list their items. They can choose to trade for real cash or swap items with others." Heavenly Demon said, "I get the barter idea, but why would players need cash?" Ryu said, "Well, some players might need cash, don't you think? Especially since there aren't many viable options available at the moment," he inquired, saying, "At the moment? Does that imply there will be other options in the future?" In response to him, Ryu Min's eyes sparkled with anticipation and said to himself, "He's sharp, as expected." Clearly, he wasn't taking this lightly. Then Ryu said to him, "Yes, exactly. I've caught a glimpse of the future. People who've crossed level 40 will soon be trading in gold rather than cash." Heavenly Demon asked in amazement, "Gold?" The two who hadn't yet reached level 40 had no idea that a trading function even existed, let alone the possibility of gold trading. Naturally, the concept of trading in gold had never crossed their minds. Then Ryu added, "When you reach level 40, the trading function becomes available. With this feature, players can exchange gold amongst themselves. All we need to do is build a secure system to facilitate this, and, of course, charge a commission in cash or gold." Heavenly Demon was silent for a while and thought to himself, a social e-market for players. It's not a bad idea at all. For now, the fact that no one had ventured into this territory gave them a significant first-mover advantage, and if they played their cards right, they could establish a monopoly in this niche. While his inclination was optimistic, Heavenly Demon didn't show it. Caution was still in order. Then he asked Ryu, "Do you believe people will actually use a social market like this?" Ryu replied, "We're currently in round 5, and players already have a considerable stash of items. As you know, items dropped by monsters can't be sold in regular shops, so players must be grappling with how to manage them." Then Heavenly Demon added, "So you're saying, if we create a platform where they can trade these items, players would welcome it with open arms?" Ryu said, "Exactly. Moreover, now that most players are over level 20, a crafting feature has been introduced, and they'll be eager to experiment with various items for recipes. When there's an easily accessible marketplace for these items, people will flock to it. And now is the perfect timing." Heavenly Demon nodded, echoing the positive sentiment. There was little more to discuss. Then Ryu asked, "What do you think of creating an auction system, allowing users to list items and participate, thereby increasing the value of select items?" He replied, "That's a fantastic idea. It would certainly pique players' interest." Then Ryu suggested, "And what about this? Allowing items to be listed without fees initially to attract users. We could also implement a tiered system that rewards more active traders," Heavenly Demon said with a smile. "That's a great concept too." A satisfied grin spread across Ryu Min's face as he observed Heavenly Demon's enthusiastic response, and Ryu said to himself, "It seems like you're quite taken with the business proposal I'm presenting." Indeed, it was a promising venture, especially in an era where players would dominate. Most importantly, it appealed to him because it was an entirely new concept, and since the Prophet is vouching it, he has no right to say no. Ryu continued saying to himself, "Creating this player-centric marketplace will benefit me as well. I will be able to easily procure the items I need, especially those crafting materials that currently have an uncertain purpose. We must secure them. By acquiring these materials, they could effortlessly craft items of legendary and god-tier quality, surpassing even unique items." Then Ryu Min inquired, "Regarding our chosen industry, we've settled on a social market. Now, what about the company's name? Do you have any ideas?" But Heavenly Demon simply shook his head and said, "Let's not dwell on my suggestions. Especially in times like these, we should follow the path foreseen by the Prophet. After all, aren't you the major shareholder of our company?" Ryu Min didn't disagree because what he said was true, and he said, "Well then, how about this? We could name it Player Place to signify that it's a space tailored for players." Heavenly Demon said, "Player Place, huh? It has a nice ring to it. I like the name." In reality, Heavenly Demon wasn't entirely sure, but he placed unwavering trust in the Prophet's judgment. Then Heavenly Demon eagerly delved into more business ideas, and he said, "By the way, I have another idea. Would you like to hear it?" Ryo said excitedly, "Yes, please share." And he listened attentively, and as the final decision-maker, evaluated and made choices. As the seconds ticked away on the office wall clock, the two of them engaged in a lively conversation, seemingly oblivious to the advancing evening. But before before they knew it, it was already evening. And Heavenly Demon said it's gotten late. Would you like to have dinner together? Ryu said, no, I'll have dinner at home. My younger sibling is waiting for me. Heavenly Demon looked disappointed and said, oh, I see. It seemed that discussing business with Ryu was quite enjoyable for him. And Ryu asked approximately how long do you think it will take to build the system and bring it to market? Heavenly Demon replied, it should take around a month if everything goes smoothly. It will be launched after round 6. Ryu nodded and said, a month wasn't too much. And he added, speaking of which, I have some information about round 6. Heavenly Demon leaned in eagerly, genuinely excited, and said, oh, that's something I've been eager to hear. The bodyguard who was sitting beside him pretended to be disinterested, but was secretly focused on Ryu's words. Finally, Ryu explained the details of round 6, including the key points and strategies to consider. Having absorbed all the information, Heavenly Demon sent a meaningful glance filled with interest, and said it seems cooperation will be crucial in round 6. Thank you for sharing, Prophet. Ryu said with a smile. You're welcome. Heavenly Demon exchanged polite words, but couldn't help but smile inwardly, saying to himself, it was a wise decision to keep the Prophet close. It feels like things are going smoothly because of it, both in the real world and in the other realm. That's what he thought. But Ryu heard every word, as if it were coming out of his mouth. He had no way of knowing that his every thought was being meticulously read by the Prophet right in front of him. Then Heavenly Demon added, well then, let's proceed with the business plan we discussed today. I'll arrange for an interim shareholders meeting as soon as possible to pass the resolutions. At that time, would it be okay for you, Mr. Ryu Min, to come and explain the business idea? Are you comfortable with that? It was a subtle way of asking if he was okay with presenting in front of people. Ryu said, yes, I'm fine with that. After the meeting ended, Ryu returned home. A few days later, as midnight approached, Ryu opened the shop window as if he had been waiting. Today's item, Wanderer's Tattered Cloak. Category, Armor. Grade, Epic. Defense, 1. Effects, Attack Speed, plus 30%. Movement Speed, plus 30%. Durability, 1,000, 1,000. Usage Restriction, regular grade or higher. Description, a dirty, torn cloak that can't perform its original function, but it has its advantages. The awaited epic item had finally appeared. The defense is garbage, but it's an item with significantly higher attack and movement speeds. The price was a whopping 20,000 gold. It might seem steep to other players, but Ryu had no qualms about it. For Ryu, who was swimming in money, it didn't make a dent. Then Ryu said, until a social market is established, I have to rely on shop items like this. And once the business thrived and item trading became more active, the need for this shop would diminish, so he could get everything he needed from the e-market. Ryu continued saying to himself at that time, I can combine as many unique or higher grade items as I want. As in the shop, they didn't offer anything beyond epic items. And for anything better, crafting was the way to go, but discovering the right recipe was no walk in the park. But hey, Ryu has got most of those crafting recipes memorized. This was because Ryu had meticulously checked all the patterns items containing crafting recipes over numerous regressions. Then Ryu said, if it weren't for these patterns, there would be no way for me to know all the crafting methods. But now, since they don't have those patterns, people will have to experiment with various combinations to figure things out. Later, as the existence of patterns becomes public knowledge, more people will embark on the hunt for them, because experimenting randomly to unearth crafting methods had its limitations. Furthermore, certain patterns are traded for exorbitant prices, even if they only contain crafting methods. And imagine getting your hands on crafting methods for god-tier items, usually out of reach by conventional means. Would you not buy them, even if it cost a fortune? Plus, having information means you can sell it to others for a pretty penny. That's how valuable crafting info was. Then Ryu said, but for someone like me who already has this information, items like patterns are utterly unnecessary. Going by that logic, Ryu Min's information was worth an immeasurable sum in terms of money. And he added, the plan is to create god-tier items before round 11. Smirking, Ryu settled onto his bed. Not because he was just sleepy. There was an interim shareholders meeting scheduled at 10 a.m. As the top shareholder and ultimate authority, he couldn't afford to miss it. Then Ryu closed his eyes, and the murmurs gradually died down. In the morning, the room buzzed with anticipation as many people gathered for the shareholders' meeting. These were all shareholders who had invested in Cheonma Consulting. At the entrance, Ansang Cheol, the bodyguard handed out simple brochures to the arriving shareholders and said, "Please take these documents and fill in your seats from the front." These brochures contained information about the company's management policies, performance data, operating profits, and more. The shareholders who entered quickly glanced at the brochures before setting them aside and focusing on the stage. As they were already informed about today's agenda through the notice of convocation, so there was no need to read the brochures. Then one said, "They must be joking, right? They want to change the industry and the company name?" Another said, "Let's hear what they're saying first." At that moment, the shareholders were anxiously awaiting the appearance of the CEO. And if the CEO made unacceptable statements, they planned to withdraw their investments as soon as they left the shareholders' meeting. As time passed, more people gathered, and the expected 10 a.m. arrived. When the time came, Heavenly Demon, dressed neatly in a suit, stepped onto the stage and said, "Hello, ladies and gentlemen, our shareholders. I am Ma Kyung-Rock, the CEO of Cheonma Consulting Chairman." But there was no applause at this point, which was unusual. It seemed like they were withholding it, waiting for something more. Smiling as if he anticipated this reaction, Heavenly Demon quickly got to the point, saying, "The reason we have convened this interim shareholders meeting today, as you all know, is to address a matter of great importance. And it may be sudden, but we, as a company, intend to change our industry, along with our company name." They finally heard it directly from the CEO's mouth himself, and sighs were heard from various places. It was a natural reaction, as investors who had put their money into Cheonma Consulting because of the company's vision were now being told that the company was taking a completely different path. Naturally, the shareholders found it bewildering and absurd. Then one said, "We were doing so well, and now you're suddenly making some strange changes?" Another said angrily, "What do you mean by changing the industry? Is this a game to you? Just keep doing consulting like you're doing now." And some impatient shareholders began to create a commotion, but Heavenly Demon didn't lose his smile and said, "All right, folks, calm down." And he added, "First, with regard to changing our industry, I'd like our largest shareholder, who now holds 51% of the company and has acquired the top management rights, to speak. Mr. Major Shareholder, can you join us?" At Heavenly Demon's call, Ryu stepped up to the stage. Then he said, "Hello, everyone. I'm Ryu Min, and I've recently become the major shareholder of Cheonma Consulting." As the shareholders looked at Ryu, they were collectively astonished. A young man, who couldn't have been more than 20, was now asserting himself as the top executive of the company. And they said to themselves, "Is this some sort of joke? That young man is the major shareholder? Having 51% of the shares implies investing billions." The shareholders' reactions towards Ryu were remarkably consistent, and they regarded him with suspicion. Some even clenched their fists, as if grappling with disbelief. Then Ryu said, "First, allow me to elucidate the industry shift we're considering." As Ryu began to explain the business idea as he did with Ma Kyung-Rock, the shareholders' eyes widened in response. Then one said, "He's planning to create a social open e-market for players? Isn't that only primarily beneficial for players?" Another said, "Is he planning to change the company's name to Player Place? Fuck, what kind of naming sense is this?" Although complaints simmered beneath the surface, but none were vocalized. In the face of numerous onlookers, Ryu exercised restraint, and Ryu couldn't help but smile at the brewing discontent, and said to himself, "Yes, it's undoubtedly frustrating. After all, these shareholders are not players." As the attendees represented a diverse age range, spanning from their 30s to their 60s, they were all ordinary individuals because the younger generation of players had largely abstained from stock investments. Because in a situation where one might face life-threatening challenges in the next round, long-term stock investments seem futile, and if they needed funds, they either sought to utilize their own skills or resorted to gambling, and some players were enticed by the temptation of criminal activities. As with a few robberies, they can easily obtain what they desire. And what is there to be afraid of when your life is at stake? Given the choice, many would opt for prison over the uncertainties of the next round. That's precisely the issue. In the eyes of ordinary citizens, players are often seen as instigators of social unrest. They were essentially viewed as potential criminals. Hence, it was natural for skepticism to arise when someone proposed creating a market website for players. Then Ryu said, "Now, that concludes my explanation. I'll be happy to address any questions if anyone has inquiries." But before Ryu Min could finish his sentence, hands shot up throughout the room. In response to the eager gestures, Ryu couldn't suppress a wry smile and said, "It appears there's a considerable degree of discontent." Then one asked, "Whose idea is it to change the perfectly fine industry?" Ryu replied, "It's my idea." Another asked, "What's your intention behind changing the industry? Do you anticipate the company's downfall?" Ryu said, "Is there any CEO who wishes for their company to fail? It's a change aimed at growing the company further." Then another inquired, "Do you have solid evidence that changing the industry will be successful? Aren't you just assuming the players will want to use this platform? Who says they will accept this idea?" Ryu said they will find it very handy, and if a few decide not to use it, they will just fall behind. And he continued saying, "Gentlemen, if the company grows, wouldn't it be good for the shareholders here? You will receive higher dividends." One asked, "What are you going to do if you try for nothing and the company goes bankrupt? Can't you just be satisfied with consulting?" Ryu replied, "I'm sorry, but I can't be satisfied with just consulting. Consulting is not viable. Moreover, the era of players is coming in the future. Changing the industry is for that reason. We need to adapt to the trend." Despite the onslaught of inquiries, Ryu remained unfazed, responding to each query methodically. As he continued, the frequency of questions gradually dwindled. Then he said, "Are there any further inquiries?" The once turbulent atmosphere had now transformed into silence, and they said to themselves, "What more is there to ask? It seems we've covered most ground, and he may be young, but he's certainly not flustered." While the shareholders were surprised, the most astonished person was Heavenly Demon, who had been observing from the sidelines. And he said to himself, "What's going on? Is this really the same prophet I know? The atmosphere feels subtly different, and I thought he was just a naive kid, but surprisingly, he's quite bold, and today he's truly impressive." Indeed, today's display of resilience in the face of criticism was rather astonishing. To answer every question amidst a barrage of complaints required a remarkable degree of composure. Then Heavenly Demon said to himself, "It's difficult to believe he's just 20 years old." For a moment, he reminisced about his own life at the age of 20, and comparing his past to Ryu Min's composure, these were undeniably less mature times. Then he said to himself, "If only I could have handled situations as calmly at 20, I might have earned my father's recognition and taken my place as the successor." Then, an unexpected awkwardness swept over him. But this was the shareholders' assembly, after all. Heavenly Demon quickly regained his composure and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, if there are no objections, we shall proceed with the vote." For a special resolution to pass, the affirmative votes needed to surpass 67%, and with Ryu Min holding 51% and Heavenly Demon holding 20%, their approval alone guaranteed the resolution's passage. In reality, there was no need to solicit other shareholders' opinion, but holding a shareholders' meeting and discussing it with the shareholders served primarily for diplomatic reasons. Then Heavenly Demon said, "Is there anyone opposed to the change in industry and company name?" But no one said anything, so with a smile, Heavenly Demon declared the results, saying, "As there are no opposing votes, I announce that the proposal has passed with 100% approval." Although they had voted in favor, the shareholders couldn't hide their unease. They hadn't raised their hands reluctantly. They had wanted to oppose it. Ryu knew what they were thinking, and he said to himself, "In a few months, these people will be thankful they didn't sell their stock. They'll be celebrating a remarkable success, and everyone would be cheering for the company's soaring success." Then Heavenly Demon said, "Now, with this, we conclude the shareholders' meeting. Thank you to all the shareholders who attended." And with Heavenly Demon's closing remark, the shareholders began to leave, one by one. During this time, Heavenly Demon approached Ryu Min and said, "Major shareholder, well done. You handled it with confidence, and there wasn't a hint of nervousness." Ryu laughed and said, "I practiced for various scenarios at home, which seems to have paid off." In truth, Ryu hadn't practiced at all, but his recent speech had somewhat softened Heavenly Demon's guard. Then Ryu says, "Now, all that remains is to create the website and build the system as soon as possible. I'll leave that part entirely to you, Mr. Heavenly Demon." He said, "Of course. Major shareholder, focus on surviving the next round without any worries." It appeared Heavenly Demon was concerned because the prophet class appeared weak. Reading his thoughts, Ryu smiled and said to himself, "I guess he's worried that if something happens to me, he won't receive any more prophecies." Then Heavenly Demon asked, "Would you like to have lunch together at the hotel?" Ryu replied, "Yes. Sounds good." And Ryu said to himself, "With this, today's tasks were completed. Now there's only one thing left. How to use Huang Yongmin." Ryu, who lost in thought about how to use him, wore a broad smile. Sunday's regular meeting of Players Haven Cafe, that cafe that Ryu previously joined under the name Little Kotal and the fake black scythe that Rio killed. A woman called Yamti appeared on with an energetic voice, and she said hello. However, unlike Yamti, the expressions of the others were far from normal. She was surprised and asked, "Huh? Why is the atmosphere like this? What's going on?" One replied, "You probably haven't heard the news, Yamti. 2 of our officers have been out of contact all this time." She said, "Really? Who are they?" Another said, "My age 30, and Jam made of honey. Since we haven't heard from them since round 5, it seems they didn't survive." She said no wonder the atmosphere felt heavy. Someone died. But at the same time, she found it puzzling, as they only met through video chat. Did they really develop such strong feelings that they were mourning like this? Then she said to herself, "I get it. They're just acting, right? Trying to impress the chairman." The founder of the cafe, known as the chairman, was undoubtedly the top dog. And in corporate life, it was only natural to cater to your superior's emotions. And that the chairman had genuinely shown sorrow every time a player died. Then she said to herself, "Well, I can't lose in that regard." After that, Yamti activated her female tears, and she said while crying, "What should we do? My age 30 and Jam made of honey." Sniff. One said, "Don't cry, Yamti. If Yamti cries, I feel like I'll start tearing up too." The officers in the chat room sympathized with Yamti's tears. Men, this is the power of a woman's tears. Then she said to herself, "Sly bunch. Look how they stick together at a time like this. Well, humans are naturally sly." The chairman entered. He cast a surprised glance at the people before him and said, "What's happening? Why is everyone in tears?" Seizing the opportunity, Lost Yak quickly reported, his tone incisive, and as anticipated, the chairman covered his face, displaying a somber reaction. This was his usual response whenever a player met their demise, and he said, "Why is something like this happening? But we're fortunate that the others have survived." Then he sighed and said, "By the way, it seems incidents like this keep happening. Our officers have been reduced to 6. One said, "Chairman, why don't we recruit new officers now?" He said, "I'd like to, but don't we lack suitable talent? The candidates who applied last time haven't even been in touch." He was referring to the 3 officer candidates, including the fake black scythe. Then Lost Yak asked, "Did those interviewees still haven't been in touch?" Chairman said, "Yes, I've called them several times, but no answer." One added, "Could it be they didn't survive in round 5? Chairman said, "While we don't know about the other 2, Black Scythe is still alive. Didn't you see the results of round 5? He passed as first place." Another asked, "Then why did Black Scythe apply and then go MIA? Chairman replied, "I have no idea." Then one said, "Could they be trying to deceive us? Or maybe Black Scythe wasn't the real one from the beginning. The reason there's been no contact is because they died in round 5. Chairman, after thinking for a moment, said, "A scammer. That actually makes sense." But suddenly one said, "Well, there's no way a guy like Black Scythe would want to join a cafe like this." This person momentarily realized their slip of the tongue and closed his mouth. However, the chairman's expression had already chilled, and he said, Did you just say, this kind of cafe? What's wrong with our cafe? Our cafe plays a pioneering role in this new era by bringing players together through cooperation. Why criticize our cafe?" The man said with worried, "I'm sorry, Chairman. I didn't mean it that way." But the chairman did not care about his apology and said, "As of this moment, I hereby remove you from your officer position. No, you're permanently expelled from the cafe, and cooperating to survive in a situation where even our combined strength falls short, we can't accept someone who belittles our cafe. From now on, poison person, you'll be on our blacklist, so adapt when a new era arrives." That man shouted, "Please, Chairman, forgive me." Now 1 officer down and 5 remained. Then Chairman said, "Now, since we've removed the troublemaker, shall we continue the meeting?" The remaining officers' faces were tense. Once again, they realized that in this place, the chairman's word was law. At that moment, Lost Yak made an ah sound and displayed a noticeably flustered expression. The chairman asked him, "What's wrong?" He replied, "There's a player who just applied now, see, and the player's nickname is Black Scythe." The chairman asked in surprise, "Black Scythe applied again?" Lost Yak said, "Well, the name is different from the previous Black Scythe. The previous Black Scythe's real name was Kim In Hong, but the person who applied this time is Hwang Yong Min." After pondering for a moment, the chairman made a decision and said, "Go visit his home. We don't know for sure if it's Black Scythe, but we have to meet to find out, don't we?" Lost Yak asked. "What if he's not?" the chairman said in a chilly tone. "If he's not Black Scythe, he'll have to pay for playing tricks on us." Not long ago, Ryu found himself in a local internet cafe, of all places, but he had a specific mission in mind: to join the enigmatic Players Haven Cafe. However, there was a catch. He was doing this under the identity of Hwang Yong Min, and this cafe didn't require any pesky real name verification, making it a haven for identity impersonation. Then Ryu said to himself, the reason behind this covert operation, it was born out of necessity, and because somebody has been masquerading as the enigmatic Black Scythe, PHC's top brass can't just sit idly by. Then Ryu mused and said, "My grand plan was to use Hwang Yong Min as bait to draw out the PHC executives. Choosing the nickname Black Scythe was no arbitrary decision. Ryu believed it would grab more than just attention. It would potentially serve as an entry point to confirm Black Scythe's authenticity through an interview, perhaps even a visit to Hwang Yong Min's residence. That's why he had meticulously listed Hwang Yongmin's home address when signing up, right down to the villa's plot number and unit details. And he smirked, confident in his tracking skills, which could unveil anyone's, and said, "Wherever these guys go, they're in my palm." Whereabouts. This was one of the perks of being a player in this realm. While Ryu could understand the cafe executives' power-hungry drive, he vehemently disagreed with their methods. In their quest for supremacy, they forced members to commit murder, shunned regular folks, and treated them like slaves. Their actions were causing a dangerous rift between the general public and players, a division that could ultimately lead to societal collapse. This was precisely why Ryu felt compelled to act. He believed that the cafe villains, who could be considered the architects of this impending chaos, needed to be eliminated. However, he also saw an opportunity to harness the might of the cafe, rather than dismantle it. Ryu also thought that Players Haven Cafe is too valuable to be eliminated. Though it was still in its infancy, the cafe was on the path to becoming a formidable organization, with over 30% of the country's players joining its ranks. Despite their often terrorist-like behavior, they were undoubtedly the most influential player organization around. So, rather than tearing it apart, Ryu decided to find a way to utilize it. He already had a plan in mind, one that would save him precious time. His plan? To seize the existing top leadership position within the cafe, taking on the role of chairman. Ryu also recognized that no matter how strong he was individually, controlling a vast number of players required more than just raw power. It demanded a well-structured organization, something he couldn't build from scratch given the ticking clock. But if he could take over an already established leadership role, everything would become more manageable. And that's where the position of Players Haven Cafe's chairman came into play. Then Ryu said, "Chairman, that guy doesn't hold any special significance. What truly matters is the role he has created. And that's why I had infiltrated the cafe, to bring down the higher-ups and claim the chairman's seat for myself." Hwang Yong-min was simply a pawn to draw them out. And with a sly grin, Ryu-min shifted his stride, heading toward Hwang Yong-min's house. Guys, don't forget to like and subscribe and wait for the next part. Last episode, we saw that Ryu was heading to Hwang Yong's house after he used Hwang Yong's name and address to register at the Players Haven Cafe in the name of the Black Scythe. On the other hand, following the mayhem of the 4th round in this nightmarish realm, many players had grown desensitized to murder. They no longer hesitated to take the lives of ordinary people, and player misconduct had reached alarming levels. In a way, it was a natural progression. With enough repetition, Even the most daunting tasks become second nature. Hwang Yong-min was no exception. He had adapted to the chaotic lifestyle that had become his daily reality. At that time, the shrill sound of a bell echoed as Hwang Yong-min entered a lottery shop. He approached the counter, where the owner had been engrossed in reading a newspaper. Finally, looking up, the owner inquired, "What brings you here today, good sir?" And with a sudden, brisk movement, Hwang Yong-min tossed his bag onto the counter, his voice laced with a steely edge. "Put all the cash you have in this bag, if you don't want trouble." The owner hesitated, his confusion palpable, and in response, Hwang Yong-min hit his fist on the wall. Despite the punch being seemingly ordinary, it sounded more like a blow from a sledgehammer, leaving a lasting impact, and he said, "What are you lagging for? Do you think this is a joke?" It was only now that the owner recognized the truth. And he said, "Is this a player?" Such incredible strength could only be attributed to a player. In fact, resisting a player was foolish, especially in South Korea, where firearms were a rarity. The owner's thoughts were interrupted by Hwang Yong-min's voice as he said, "What's the holdup? Hurry and fill the bag. Do you really want to risk it?" The owner said, "I'll do it right away," and he collected cash from the register and presented the bag, anxiety clear in his eyes. Then Hwang Yong asked, "Is this all you've got?" The owner replied, "Well, lately, business hasn't been great. Lottery ticket sales have been suspended, you see. I do sell various items like a convenience store, but revenue—" Hwang Yong shouted angrily. "Who asked for your life story? You're aware there's a safe, right? You think you can fool me? Go get everything from there. Understand? Go," the owner said in fear. "Yes," and he reluctantly retrieved the money from the safe. "It was about 10 million won," Hwang Yong said. "That should suffice." Then he turned to leave, but abruptly pivoted back and said, "You know, if you ever think about reporting this, think again. I'll break out of jail, and when I do, I'll come for you." The owner, now considering reporting the incident, swallowed hard. After that, Hwang Yong quickly retreated to a nearby alley, minimizing the chances of being recognized. Then a smile involuntarily spread across his face, and he said to himself, "Today's haul is quite the catch. This should sustain me for a month. In the real world he could manage, but what about the other world? Could he endure the next round?" Such thoughts cast a shadow over his face and said, "Damn, if only it weren't for that penalty." In fact, the permanent stat reduction penalty had not only hindered his growth, but also sapped his motivation. Then he added, "I managed to defeat around 300 orcs this time, but can I survive the next round?" The more he pondered, the heavier his sighs became, and he continued saying, "Damn you, Black Scythe. It's all because of that bastard." It was due to Black Scythe that he had lost his friends, suffered stat reductions, and resorted to robbery. Then he shouted in the alley before making his escape, "It's all that bastard's fault." Upon opening the shabby front door, a cramped one-room apartment greeted him. Surprisingly, he paid a monthly rent of 50,000 won for this place, and he said, "Still, it's good to be independent. No more nagging parents." After the fourth round had ended, he cut ties with his parents. He had acquired money through robbery and started chasing the dream of living a thug's life with gang members. But with the world in chaos, who needs to be a thug? As everything had become too bothersome, so he had discarded that idea, securing this one-room apartment instead. Then he said, "At least I can make enough money through robberies as things are now." But he sighed and said, "How much longer do I have to live like this?" In the past 4 months, much had transpired. He had fought numerous battles against monsters like goblins, trolls, and orcs to survive. He had even lost a limb to the monster known as Black Scythe. He had also killed his role model, Jo Jung-shik, by striking him from behind. And as for his close friends from his school days, he had personally ended their lives. And in a desperate bid to earn some cash, he reluctantly turned to robbery, steering clear of any criminal affiliations. His life had taken a chaotic turn, spiraling into the abyss. Then he said, "If only I hadn't crossed paths with that bastard Black Scythe," and a deep sigh escaped his lips. Suddenly he felt as though he was squandering precious time, lost in thought, and he said, "This isn't the moment for such indulgence. I must make every remaining moment count, experience everything I've ever desired. What should I try next? Should I try to rape a woman? But suddenly he said, "Oh, by the way, aren't all my peers are players too?" But he backed down from the idea of raping women of the same age as him, because they had certainly gone through hell as well during the previous rounds, and whoever remained of them would be strong and able to resist. And he said, "There's no choice but to set my sights on older women, and if they were over 30, they'd be easier to overpower." And he added, "Regardless, I must search. My wish is to be with a beautiful woman, isn't it? And perhaps an ordinary person resembling Seo Arin would be on the streets." With a tune humming in his heart, he donned his coat, ready to step out. If the mood struck him, he might visit a room salon, as he yearned to spend money as if he were a character in a movie, surrounded by women, showcasing his wealth. And he said, "If I run low on cash, I can always raid a store again." And with unwavering determination, he swung open the door. But suddenly he said, "What the hell?" Hwang Yongmin's reaction was one of shock. As a stranger stood at his doorstep, he asked, "Who are you?" The man didn't respond his question and said, "Are you Hwang Yongmin?" Hwang Yongmin regarded the stranger with cautious eyes. In response, the man offered a friendly smile and said, "I suppose my guess was correct, judging by your reaction." Then Hwang Yong asked, "Who are you? Are you a police officer?" The man laughed and said, "A police officer? Why have you committed a crime? Let's discuss this inside." Attempting to enter, the man tried to push past Hwang Yong. So Hwang Yong said angrily, "Hey, who told you can go in? Who are you?" The man said, "Oh, my apologies. I'm Lost Yak, the interviewer from the Player Haven Cafe. You applied for membership this morning, didn't you?" Hwang Yong said, "Are you on drugs? What nonsense are you talking about?" Then the man asked, "Aren't you Black Scythe?" Hwang Yong said in amazement, "Black Scythe? Me?" Hwang Yong's bewildered response clued Lost Yak into the possibility of a misunderstanding. And he said, "Let me ask again. Aren't you Black Scythe?" Hwang Yong said, "You think I'm Black Scythe? Are you joking?" Then the man asked, "Did you not apply for membership at Player Haven Cafe?" Hwang Yong said with confusion, What? What's that?" Lost Yak sighed, realizing his error, and said, "I apologize for the confusion. I'll take my leave." Hwang Yong said, "What's going on? You should at least tell me why you're here, you jerk." Lost Yak said, "It appears that someone played a prank using your personal information. Given that your name and address match," Hwang Yong said angrily. "So, someone used my personal information? Who the hell was it?" But suddenly they heard someone saying it was me. Both Hwang Yongmin and Lost Yak turned their heads in response to an unexpected voice. As soon as they looked back, they saw someone wearing a mask. Then Lost Yak asked, "Are you the one who used Hwang Yongmin's personal information?" And Hwang Yong said in surprise, "What the hell? Who is this crazy guy?" Hwang Yongmin's bewildered reaction was expected. After all, a masked lunatic had suddenly appeared and claimed identity theft. And he added, "You're actually admitting this, right? Damn it, how do you know who I am?" Ryu said, "I know." Hwang Yong said angrily, "Who the hell are you?" Instead of responding, Ryu retrieved Death's scythe from his inventory. Witnessing the colossal weapon, both Lost Yak and Hwang Yongmin were left in stunned silence. Then Ryu said, "Does this answer your question? In fact, the player using a scythe is not common, especially a scythe as large and brutish as this one. And if there is a player carrying such a scythe, there is only one person." They both thought of the same person as if they were twins. They were thinking about the player who is a top-ranked, high-level ranker, known to anyone in the other realm. And they said to themselves, "Shit, is that a Black Scythe?" But suddenly Lost Yak erased his surprised expression and narrowed his eyes thinly, and said to himself, "Could it be that he's another imposter?" And he added, "There was a discrepancy between reality and calling oneself the Black Scythe. First of all, he's small. He doesn't look like he's even 170 centimeters tall. And he had a large scythe that looks hard to swing, a somewhat weak voice, a petite figure, and so on." And Lost Yak continued saying, "Of course, comparing the real person to his avatars is stupid, but the problem is he also looks weak." But Hwang Yongmin, who had actually met the Black Scythe before, knew. And he said to himself, "That's the Black Scythe. For real, it's the Black Scythe." Although their physique was different, their tone and atmosphere were the same. Above all, the look in those eyes that appeared through the mask was unforgettable. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and wait for the next episode. Then Hwang Yongmin said, "It's real." The real one appeared, and his head stood on end, and his hands and feet trembled intermittently. It was like the reaction of a herbivore recognizing a predator. And he said to himself, Black Scythe, showing himself, "It hasn't been a long time since I promised myself to cut him in half if I saw him in reality. But, to be honest, it was just something I said. With the level difference being more than double, how could I kill him?" And he also asked himself, but why is the Black Scythe here? No, more importantly, why did he use my identity? There should be no reason for him to have any business with me now. Whether it was because his hands were sweating or to ease his tension, Huang Yongmin clenched and released his hands repeatedly. With such strange behavior, Lostiak once again looked at the Black Scythe and said to himself, "Is it really the Black Scythe?" Even he, who had thought of him so lightly, had a somewhat tense expression now. I've never seen him in person, but if he's really the Black Scythe, someone like me at level 20 wouldn't be a match. And perhaps the only answer is a surprise attack. But suddenly, Ryu said to Lostyak, "You didn't come here alone, did you? Tell the others to come out. I know everything." Lostyak was shocked. He was so impressed that he wanted to applaud. And he said to himself, he even knew there were other executives here. Until just a while ago, he was suspecting whether he was the real Black Scythe. But now, he was sure. Regardless of whether he was the Black Scythe or not, he was not an easy opponent. At that moment, two men who had been hiding revealed themselves, and one of them said, "Man, we've been caught. How did you know we were here?" But suddenly, without knowing anything about the presence detecting common skill, another two men tried to approach Ryu. Then Ryu said in a sharp tone, "Don't come any closer if you don't want to die." But one of them said, "You're just all talk." Another asked, "Hey, are you the Black Scythe?" At man's question, Ryu shook the scythe and said, "You should be able to tell by looking at this, right?" The man said, "I heard that you use a scythe as your main weapon, but we've never seen the Black Scythe in person, so we don't know just by looking at a scythe." Then Ryu sighed and said, "Then why did you ask? You won't believe it anyway," the man said, "but we still want to hear it from your own mouth."